somewhere far beneath the surface of the lands between, before gold ever touched the sky, there was something else, something older, something that did not shine, but consumed before the Erdtree, before the Golden Order, before the Age of Gods. There was a mountain, a restless one. Its insides burned, its veins flowed with fire, and deep within it, something lived, an ancient serpent, not just a creature, but a god, a being that did not rule, did not guide, did not bless, but devoured. There was once a religion built around it, a forgotten one, erased, buried, lost to time, but not completely. Traces remained, weapons, rituals, symbols, all pointing to a truth the world tried to forget. The serpent was worshipped through sacrifice. Blades were shaped in its image, curved like fangs, designed not just to kill, but to offer, to feed. Life was given to it, and in return, it grew, larger, stronger, hungrier, because that was its nature. To take, to consume, to never be satisfied. And yet, even something like this can be challenged. There were those, long ago, who stood against it, warriors who refused to let the world be devoured. They forged a weapon, a strange one, a blade that was not just steel, but light, a weapon meant for one purpose, to kill a god that could not truly die. And for a time, it worked. The serpent was defeated, driven back, silenced, but not destroyed, because some things do not end. They wait, and as the ages passed, as new gods rose, as the Erdtree spread its roots across the world, the serpent remained, hidden, forgotten, hungry, waiting for something or someone to return to it. And eventually, someone did. A man, a demigod, a judge, a man who had begun to question everything. His name was Rykard, and his story does not begin with the serpent. It begins with a family far from the volcano, far from the fire. There was once a place of calm waters and pale moonlight, Liurnia, a land of scholars, of magic, of quiet reflection, and at its heart, a queen, a woman of great power, great beauty, and deep sorrow. She ruled through knowledge, through understanding, through the cold, steady light of the moon. Her name was Renala, but even she could not stand alone. War came from the capital, from gold, from the Erdtree, and leading that war was a champion, a man of strength, of faith, of unwavering purpose. Dagon. He was everything the Golden Order desired. Perfect, loyal, unbreakable, and yet the war did not end in destruction. It ended in something unexpected. union, Raydegan and Renala, came together, not as enemies, but as one, and from that union came 3 children, Ranni, Radon, and Rykard, each one gifted, each one powerful, each one destined for something far beyond themselves. But even from the beginning, Rykard was different, not weaker, not lesser, just different. Where Radon looked to strength, Rykard looked to understanding. Where Ranni looked to escape, Rykard looked to truth. He was not drawn to battle, not drawn to glory. He was drawn to systems, to rules, to laws, to the invisible structures that held the world together. And so he became something rare, a thinker, a judge, a man who did not simply follow order, but enforced it. When he rose to power, he was given a title, Praetor, a word that carried weight, authority, responsibility. It meant he would stand at the center of justice itself, and from there he would see everything, every crime, every heresy, every flaw in the Golden Order. At first, he believed in it. Of course he did. The Erdtree gave meaning, structure, purpose. It promised a perfect world. But the longer he watched, the more cracks he began to see. Because perfection is often built on suffering, and the Golden Order was no exception. Those born different were cast aside. Those who saw visions were punished. Those who questioned were silenced. And Rykard was the one who had to decide what happened to them. He saw the fear, the pain, the desperation, and slowly, quietly, something inside him began to chain. Not all at once, just small thoughts, small doubts, questions that refused to disappear. Why must everything serve the Erdtree? Why must all life be bound to one system? Why was suffering so easily justified in the name of order? These thoughts did not fade. They grew, and with them, so did something else. Distance between Rykard and the world he served. Because once you begin to question, you cannot stop. And once you see the truth, you cannot unsee it, even if that truth leads you somewhere dark, somewhere deep beneath a mountain, where something ancient is waiting for someone just like him. And slowly, inevitably, Rykard began to walk that path. Rykard did not fall all at once. There was no single moment, no sudden decision, no instant betrayal. Instead, he drifted, slowly, quietly, almost without noticing, because the deeper he moved into his role, the more he began to see the truth behind the Golden Order. Not the surface, not the shining gold, but what lay beneath it. And what lay beneath was fear, fear of anything different, fear of anything unknown, fear of losing control. And so, control had to be maintained at any cost. This was the true duty of a praetor. Not justice, control, and to maintain that control. Rykard was given power. Power over people. Power over truth. Power over punishment. And with that power came a new responsibility: to uncover heresy, to find those who threatened the order, and to deal with them quietly, efficiently, without question. At first, this may have felt necessary, even justified. After all, order must be protected. But over time, those lines began to blur, because what counts as heresy in a world that fears change? A cursed child, a prophet with visions of fire, a family accused of something they never did. In the eyes of the Golden Order, all of them could be guilty, and Rykard was the one who had to decide. But he did not work alone. He had followers, men and women, who carried out his will. They were known as inquisitors, not warriors, not knights, something colder. Their purpose was simple: to extract truth by any means necessary. Pain was just a tool, and in time, that tool became refined. Devices were created, weapons designed not for battle, but for suffering, wheels lined with blades that tore through flesh, candles of iron that burned wounds closed, only to reopen them again, each one crafted with purpose: to prolong pain, to break will, to force truth out of silence. And all of this happened far from the eyes of the public, because the Golden Order did not want to be seen like this. It wanted to appear pure, perfect, so its darkness was hidden, moved somewhere else, somewhere distant, somewhere quiet, somewhere like Volcano Manor. At first glance, the manor did not seem like a place of suffering. It was elegant, warm, welcoming. Guests were invited. Rooms were prepared. Food was served. Everything felt normal, almost comforting. But that was the point, because Volcano Manor was not just a home. It was a mask. Behind its walls, hidden from sight, was something else entirely. A network of passages, secret paths, hidden doors, leading downward, into darkness, into places where screams could not escape, where truth was not discovered, but forced, and those who entered did not always leave. Many were invited: nobles, scholars, suspects, people who had drawn attention. They would arrive, expecting conversation, and instead, they would disappear, taken quietly, slipped behind illusion, dragged into the depths, beneath the manor, where Rykard's inquisitors waited. This was his system, a machine of judgment, precise, efficient, unforgiving, and through it, he saw everything, every secret, every lie, every hidden truth within the lands between. And the more he learned, the more something began to shift, because the people he judged were not always wrong. Some spoke of things that did not fit the order. Visions, dreams, whispers of fire. They spoke of the Erdtree, burning, of a world free from its control. At first, these words would have been dismissed. Madness, heresy. But when you hear something again and again and again, it begins to linger, to echo, to take root, and Rykard could not ignore it, because he had seen the truth. He had seen what the order did to maintain itself, and he began to wonder, what if the order was the problem? What if everything was built on something false? What if the Erdtree was not salvation, but control? These thoughts were dangerous, not just to the world, but to him, because a praetor was not supposed to question. He was supposed to enforce. And yet, Rykard kept thinking, kept watching, kept listening to the whispers that others were punished for. And slowly, those whispers began to feel like truth. At the same time, his world was changing. His father left Radagon, abandoned Renala, left her behind to become something else, to stand beside a god. And though the world accepted it, though it was seen as destiny, to a son, it was something different. It was betrayal. Renala was broken, lost, and her children were left to make sense of it. For Rykard, this may have been another fracture, another reason to question the order, because even those who upheld it were not bound by its rules. They could leave, change, rewrite their place in the world, but others were judged, punished, destroyed, and Rykard saw the imbalance, saw the hypocrisy, and began to turn away. Not openly, not yet, but inside, the change had already begun. The praetor was no longer certain. The judge was no longer convinced, and the man who once enforced order was beginning to reject it. But rejecting something is only the beginning, because once you tear something down, you must replace it. And Rykard was about to find something new, something older, something that did not pretend to be righteous, something that did not hide what it truly was, a force that did not judge, did not lie, did not disguise itself as good, a force that simply took, and in that honesty, Rykard saw something strangely pure, because at least the serpent did not pretend. Soft pause, and so, step by step, thought by thought, choice by choice, Rykard moved closer to the mountain, closer to the truth he had been seeking. and closer to the moment that would change him forever. There are moments in history that do not simply pass. They echo, they ripple outward, touching everything, changing everything, even long after they are over. For the lands between, that moment was a night, a silent one, a night where no armies marched, no banners flew, no warnings were given. And yet, by the time the sun rose, the world was already broken. This was the night of black knives. But like all things, it did not begin with the act itself. It began with a decision far from the capital, far from the Erdtree. There was someone who had already chosen to reject it all. Ranni, a princess, a demigod, and like Rykard, she had seen the truth. The order was not freedom, it was control, and she refused to be bound by it. But Ranni did not question quietly. She acted. She planned something careful, precise, and devastating to strike at the order. She needed something impossible, power that even the gods feared. Death, true death, not the kind that returns to the Erdtree, not the kind that continues in spirit, but an ending, final, absolute, and for that, she needed a fragment of something forbidden, the rune of death, a power that had been sealed away, hidden, guarded, because if released, it could kill even gods. Somehow, Ranni obtained it, stole it, or perhaps was helped, because something like this does not happen easily. It requires access, knowledge, timing, and that is where the question begins. Where was Rykard? In all of this, we are never told directly, but there are hints, small ones, quiet ones, the kind that only reveal themselves if you look closely, because after everything was done, after the night had passed, after the world had changed, Ranni gave something to Rykard, a reward, not a gift given lightly, but something earned, and that raises a question. What did he do to deserve it? As Praetor, Rykard held authority. He understood the capital, its structure, its defenses. He knew how things worked, behind the scenes, and if someone wanted to move unseen, to strike at the heart of the Golden Order, there would be no better ally. Perhaps he opened a path. Perhaps he ensured no one was watching. Perhaps he simply allowed something that should have been stopped. Whatever his role, it was enough to make him part of it, part of the night that would change everything. Because when the assassins moved, they moved perfectly, silent, precise, blades forged from death itself, cut through flesh and soul, and their target was not random. It was chosen, a demigod, Godwyn, the Golden, beloved, respected, a symbol, of the order itself, and in a single moment, he was struck down, not wounded, not defeated, killed, truly killed, something that should not have been possible, something that shattered the illusion of invincibility, because if a demigod could die, then nothing was safe. The shock spread quickly. Fear, confusion, anger, and at the center of it all, the Golden Order began to fracture, because it had been built on the idea of permanence, of eternity, and now that illusion was gone, and Rykard watched it happen, watched the system he once enforced begin to collapse, and perhaps, for the first time, he felt something close to certainty, because this proved it. The order was not perfect. It was fragile, breakable, and if it could be broken, then it could be destroyed. Fully, completely, this was the moment where doubt became belief, where questions became answers, where hesitation became resolve. Rykard no longer wondered if the order was wrong. He knew, and now he would act. But even in this moment, even as the world fell apart, there was something else, something quieter, something almost human, because despite everything, Rykard still cared about his family, about what they once were. There are signs of this, small ones, a portrait hanging quietly within the walls of Volcano Manor, not of power, not of rebellion, but of his brother, Radon, a warrior, a loyal son of the Order, everything Rykard was turning against. And yet, the portrait remained, untouched, not destroyed, not removed, because even as he rejected the world, he had not fully rejected them. Not yet, but that would change, because after the night of black knives came something worse. The shattering, the Elden Ring, broken, its power scattered, and with it, a new command, a terrible one, a call to all demigods to take what they could, to become something greater, or to be cast aside. And so, they fought for power, for control, for survival, each one driven by their own desire. But Rykard chose a different path. He did not want to rule. He did not want to repair the order. He did not want to sit upon a throne. No, he wanted something else, something far more dangerous. He wanted to end it, all of it, the Erdtree, the gods, the system, everything. And to do that, he would need power, not borrowed power, not granted power, but something deeper, something ancient, something that did not care about order, or balance, or meaning, something that only understood hunger. And so, Rykard turned fully toward the mountain, toward the place where something waited, something that had been waiting for a very long time. And this time, He would not just listen. He would answer. War in the lands between was nothing new. It had happened before. It would happen again. But this war was different because this time it was not about power. Not truly. It was about belief. On one side stood the Golden Order, defenders of the Erdtree, protectors of what remained, and on the other stood something far less certain, a lord who had chosen defiance. Rykard, by now, he had withdrawn fully, no longer a praetor, no longer a servant of the order. Now he ruled only one place, Volcano Manor, a fortress built into fire itself. And from there, his message spread, not quietly, not in secret, but openly, a declaration. If the Erdtree and the gods would demand obedience, then he would refuse. If the world was built on control, then he would tear it down, even if that meant becoming something else, something worse. And there were those who followed him, knights, soldiers, followers, who believed in his vision. They saw him not as a monster, but as a liberator, someone willing to stand against a broken system. And for a time, that belief held, but the Golden Order could not ignore him. It had endured wars, rebellions, threats, but this was different because Rykard was not trying to take power. He was trying to destroy it, and that could not be allowed. So for perhaps the first time, the Order did something unusual. It attacked, not to defend, not to repel, but to strike first. An assault on Mount Gelmir. Slow, deliberate, relentless. Camps were established, one after another, as the army advanced, step by step, closer to the manor, closer to Rykard, and the land itself began to chain, because war does not leave things untouched. It twists them, breaks them, and in Gelmir, it did something worse. It rotted them. Bodies began to pile, not buried, not honored, left where they fell. Soldiers left to decay in the open air, and as supplies ran low, as the battle dragged on, something else began to happen, something desperate. The living turned to the dead, not out of cruelty, but survival. Hunger does not care about dignity, and slowly the battlefield became something else, not a place of war, but a place of suffering, a place where men lost themselves. Some went mad, others simply gave up, and in the middle of it all, there were things that should not have been there. Frenzy, a madness that spreads like fire. It appears in those who have seen too much, felt too much, endured more than they were meant to. And here it flourished. Soldiers wept, screamed, laughed without reason. Some even turned on their own allies, and the land itself reflected this. Strange growths appeared, eyes watching from the earth, as if the world itself had begun to lose its mind. And still, the war continued. But what of Rykard? Where was he in all of this? At first, he fought, he led, he resisted the assault. His knights stood with him, loyal, determined, believing that their cause still meant something. But slowly, that belief began to fade, because something had changed. Not just the war. Rykard himself, he had gone deeper into the mountain, deeper than before, into places that should have remained buried. And there, he found more than just ruins, more than just remnants. He found truth, ancient rituals, forgotten magic, power that did not belong to the Erdtree, power that came from sacrifice, from death, from something older and far more honest, because this power did not pretend to be good. It did not hide. It simply took. And in that, Rykard saw something familiar. Because was that not what the gods already did? Did they not consume? Did they not take life and turn it into strength? The Erdtree itself fed on the dead, and yet it was called holy. So what was the difference? Why was one sacred and the other blasphemy? These thoughts consumed him, and the more he thought, the clearer it became. There was no difference, only perspective, only control. And so, if the gods could take, then so could he, but not like them, not hidden, not disguised, openly, completely. And as the war dragged on, as his forces weakened, as the battlefield turned into a graveyard, Rykard reached a point from which there was no return, because belief alone was no longer enough. If he wanted to win, if he wanted to destroy the order, he needed something more, something absolute, something that could not be defeated. And deep within the mountain, he already knew what that was. The serpent, the ancient god, the thing that never truly died. It had always been there, waiting, and now Rykard was ready, not to worship it, not to serve it, but to become something else, something greater, something that could devour everything. And perhaps, in that moment, he believed this was the only way, the only path left, because everything else had already failed. His faith, his duty, his world, all of it had broken, so he would break it further. He would tear it apart from the inside, even if it meant losing himself. And so, as the war reached its end, as the battlefield fell silent, as the last of his loyal knights either died or turned away, Rykard made his final decision, not in anger, not in madness, but with complete certainty. he would offer himself to the serpent, and in doing so, he would become something the world could not ignore, something the gods themselves would have to fear. At the heart of the mountain, beneath layers of stone, of ash, of time, there was a chamber, a quiet one, almost sacred, not in the way of temples, not in the way of the Erdtree, but in something older, something that did not ask for worship, only offering. And it was here that Rykard came for the last time as a man. There were no armies now, no knights, no followers, only silence. The war above was already lost, his forces scattered, his cause broken, and yet he did not hesitate, because in his mind, this was never defeat. This was evolution, a final step to become something greater than what he had been, something that could finally challenge the gods. In front of him, the serpent waited, not roaring, not moving, just present, ancient, endless, as if it had always known. This moment would come, as if it had always known. He would choose this, and perhaps it had, because the serpent does not seek, it waits, and in time, everything comes to it. Rykard stepped forward, not as a victim, not as prey, but as something else, a willing offering, a king presenting himself to be devoured. There is something strange about that moment, because most would feel fear, most would resist, but Rykard did neither. He believed, truly, that this was right, that this was the only way to tear down a broken world. And so, without hesitation, he gave himself to the serpent, and the serpent accepted. It opened its jaws, and in a single motion, it consumed him. Not just flesh, not just bone, everything, his body, his power, his great rune, all of it swallowed, and for a moment there was nothing, only silence, only darkness, only the slow, ancient rhythm of something digesting. But the story does not end there, because Rykard did not disappear. He remained somewhere within it, his will, his thoughts, his purpose, still alive. And as the serpent fed, it changed. It grew, larger, stronger. Something new began to form. Not a man, not a god, something in between, something worse. The Blasphemous Lord, a being that did not serve the gods, but devoured them. And from that moment, everything changed. Volcano Manor was no longer a place of judgment. It became something else, a place of hunger, a place where life was no longer valued, only consumed. The servants who remained adapted, or they broke. Some lost their minds, others gave in. because to survive, they had to accept the truth. Their lord was no longer human, but still they followed. Among them was one who remained closest. Tanith. She had once been a dancer, graceful, calm, a woman of quiet strength, and somehow, in a world of chaos, she had found Rykard, or perhaps he had found her. We do not know how, but we know what followed. She stayed, even after everything, even after his transformation, even after he became something unrecognizable. She did not leave. She did not turn away. Instead, she devoted herself to him completely, because in her eyes, he was still her lord, still the man she had chosen, and perhaps, in some small way, she was right, because somewhere within the serpent, Rykard still spoke, still commanded, still believed, and his belief had not changed. He still wanted the same thing, to devour the gods, to tear down the Erdtree, to end the system that had caused so much suffering. But now, his methods were different. Now, he would grow stronger by consuming others, champions, warriors, anyone powerful enough to matter, because each life added to him, each soul became part of him, until one day he would be strong enough to consume everything. And so the invitations began. Tarnished were called to the manor, not as prisoners, but as guests, given a choice to join him or to become part of him, and many accepted, not because they were forced, but because they believed, because the world had already broken them, and Rykard offered something else, not salvation, but truth, a brutal, honest truth, that power is all that matters, that gods are not sacred, and that everything can be consumed, even them. And deep within the manor, the cycle continued. New beings were born, creatures that were neither man nor serpent, but something in between, twisted reflections of what Rykard had become. The man-serpents, some were mindless, others almost aware, fragments of humanity, lost within something else, proof of what happens when boundaries are broken, when nature is reshaped, when a man tries to become more than he was ever meant to be. And yet, even in this horror, there is something sad, because Rykard did not see himself as a monster. He saw himself as necessary, as someone who chose the truth when others chose comfort. And in a way, he was right, because the world was never as pure as it claimed to be. The gods did take, the Erdtree did consume, the Order did punish. Rykard just stopped pretending, but in doing so, he lost something, something small, something quiet, something human. And in its place, there was only hunger. Endless, unstoppable, eternal, because the serpent never stops. It only takes, and takes, and takes, until nothing remains. Very soft pause. And so, the mountain still stands, silent, burning, deep within, and beneath it, something waits, not asleep, not dead, just waiting, growing, listening for the next voice, the next soul, the next offering, because one day it will be ready, ready to rise, ready to consume, ready to devour the gods. And when that day comes, there will be no order left, no Erdtree, no light, only hunger, and a voice echoing softly through the dark. Together, we will devour everything. Sleep now. The serpent is patient. It will still be there when you wake.